Hey everybody, Thunderhands here. My website is spiritofcrazyhorse.com, so check it out. Today I want to talk about conscience. And I was thinking about that term or that concept about conscience. What is conscience? And I have my own take on it, but I always like to look at all the different explanations and thoughts and theories and philosophies and all that stuff on conscience. And the thing that got me to thinking about conscience is how some people seem to be void of it. Uh, some people seem to put it on hold, or some people don't have a conscience. People like to shoot missiles and drones over different places, and supposedly, quote unquote, they're good people, and they have their own families and their own children. But what is it that in their head or in their conscience and their mind that justifies shooting a missile over and blowing another parent's children apart and not their own? I mean, okay, so anyway, the definition of conscience is, and this is the dictionary's definition, the awareness of a moral or ethical aspect to one's conduct, together with the urge to prefer right over wrong. Let your conscience be your guide. Well, that's definition one. I call that the simpleton's definition, because there's so many contradictory things or things that don't fit in there, and I'll get back to that later. And then the B, that was A. B is the source of moral or ethical judgment or pronouncement. A document that serves the nation. Ooh, they got the nation in there. The nation's conscience. And then C, conformity to one's own sense of right conduct. A person of unflagging conscience. That's interesting. One's own sense of right conduct. And then there's another definition, the part of the superego in psychoanalysis that judges the ethical nature of one's actions and thoughts and then transmits such determinations to the ego for consideration. Well, we're getting closer. And then the third definition is obsolete consciousness. So if that wasn't confusing, then I don't know what is. But anyway, if you look at all the definitions of conscience, there's probably 100 different philosophers. There's the Bible, if you look up the word conscience if you Google it or whatever, if you look it up, there's just a myriad of things. And a lot of people want to say, oh, God gave it to you. You have a God-given conscience. And other people say... So basically the argument comes down, or the thoughts that come down about it are, is it innate? Is a conscience innate? Or is it, and that means, for those who don't know, something that's in you, something that's just been with you all the time, something that's guides your actions through life, or is it learned? So I like to look at the famous psychoanalysts like Freud and Jung, Jung, for those who don't know, Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, excuse me, on these different things. And they didn't seem to really have it pinned down. They seemed to think that their thoughts were in between, that yes, there was some type of faculty or mechanism that was inbred in us that could be called a conscience, but then there's the other thought that we learn. Now when you get to that point about it being inbred in us, or that there's a conscience there, and then you get into these, when I get back to that first definition of moral and ethical and right and wrong, see, one man's morals is another man's immorals, and one man's ethics is another man's, whatever. One man's right is another man's wrong is what I'm trying to say, I guess. So that doesn't work. And if you think that doesn't work, well then look at the people that are raised, say a tribal people that are raised on an island that are cannibals, that never heard of civilization. And they go out and their regular thing is going out and hunting for the other people and eating them. So where was the innate, inbred conscience there? I'm not sure about that one. Maybe we'll have to check that out more closely. Maybe they think it's a good possibility, being raised the way they were, that that's not right or wrong, what they're doing. Now, I always said that, when we're born as babies, we're like a clear glass of water. We have this thing called essence, and essence is basically being next to the creative force, whatever you want to call it. And as we grow older, and as we grow up as children, our parents and religion and governments and all these different people, and I talk about this in my book, Listen to the Wind, Speak from the Heart, people indoctrinate us. In other words, we are born pretty much like a clear, clean slate, or a clear glass of water, and then all these people start forming what we call a conscience. Now I know some people are thinking, oh, we need a conscience because if we didn't, everybody would just kill each other. And no, I don't think that's true. Now my definition I just gave about a clear glass of water, and before that having an essence. That essence to me is some type of creative force beyond the duality, okay? And the duality is when you get down, I've talked about it before, the Chinese symbol of yin and yang, black and white, good and evil. That's all within the illusion here. But when you get beyond the duality, when you get outside or above or to that higher consciousness, then we get into what we call pure essence. And if there is no right and wrong beyond that, then what is it that is beyond that? Well, whatever it is pure. It's a pureness. And I tend to think that pureness has to do with how we are all one. And the Lakota say, Mitakuye Oyasin, which means we are all one, or all my relations. Now maybe that's the thing that is inbred in us, or that we receive, just realization on this higher level, that God level, that whatever you want to call it, that we are all one, and that we wouldn't treat ourselves bad. We wouldn't cut our own throat normally. We wouldn't abuse ourselves, although many people do, but that's another story. We wouldn't abuse ourselves physically, so why would we do it to another person? Because if that person is us, then we're doing it to ourselves, right? That to me makes some kind of spiritual sense. But let's get back to the inbred thing. That part, that essence, is way beyond our understanding. You can't put a word on it like conscience or whatever. Because again, that's not a moral thing, a right and wrong thing. That is beyond the duality, beyond this lower realm. And this lower realm is where we get that word conscience. And that's laid on us mostly by religion. Now, one of the things that got me thinking about conscience is how we beat ourselves up sometimes because of things that supposedly bother our conscience. Okay? In other words, we may have a relationship, or we may have done this, or at some point we may have shoplifted something, or we may, have done something on a sexual level or a relationship level, and it just bothers our conscience to no end. Our conscience just won't let it. Well, that's not conscience, that's guilt. Okay, and guilt is something that is a learned response to something that has been inbred in us about our belief systems. Okay, hope you're following me here. I know this is rather complex. And Carl Jung tended to agree with this concept about there being a super ego or whatever. See, these are all just words that influence the ego, and then it might be a outside source. I tend to believe in outside sources, and I tend to believe in a what do you call it, a guiding, a pole star or whatever that is within us. But then as we grow up, again, I have to repeat this, as we grow up, we become brainwashed. And I did a thing on mind control earlier, which kind of explains how all this stuff happens. So then you start thinking about how can you best use your faculties, and let's use the word faculties or mind or spirit, to best serve you. And that's why people don't understand me sometimes when I say I'm a free spirit and I'm not hooked up to all this right and wrong and yin and yang about relationships and things of that nature. Oh, this is right and that's wrong, or sexual practices or whatever, that people come down and they think, oh, that guy shouldn't be with her, he's older, or that younger woman, shouldn't be with him, or how about an older woman having a younger man, or same sex, whatever. And these people, they judge, okay? And often times they say, oh, if he had a conscience, or he should realize that's wrong, or she should realize that's wrong. If they lived by their conscience, if conscience was their guide. Well, let me tell you this, conscience can get you, what they call conscience, can get you into a whole bushel of trouble. Especially when you start buying into all these things that you've been brainwashed with to make you feel guilty. And the biggest perpetrators are, again, I know I beat this drum a lot, religion, relationships. People try to use you all the time. They try to manipulate you. I don't care where you are, on Facebook or wherever. They all have an agenda. And then there's the government. And these people that profess to be Christians and have this God-given conscience have no conscience at all. And again, I'll come full circle. When an administration, and I don't care what administration it is politically, whether it's Republican or Democrat or the Freedom Party or the Peace or whatever, I don't even know what parties they have anymore. There's only two really that are ruling, and they're basically one, because there's somebody behind them, the big money people. But when you get somebody, let's say a president, could be the current president, could be past president, or a Secretary of State. And I won't mention any names of past Secretaries of State, like with the initials HC. But when these people spew out of their mouths things like, we came, we saw, we killed, or whatever, these are administration people. And when you hear things like, the president making speeches about how much he likes children with this gassing attack that happened a while ago, and how he'll come out on the lawn with his family and sit on the lawn, and this is his family, and this is the American way, and all this stuff. And then go over there and say, yeah, go push that button that's going to send a drone over there and blow these kids apart. Well, let me tell you, if he had to go over there and grab that kid by the hair, pull out a butcher knife or a hunting knife and slit its throat, would he do that? These guys got a lot of courage when they say, they can tell people to push a button, or they can sign a bill, or they can make a decree on a piece of paper that says, what's good for us isn't good for them. We deserve freedom, prosperity, freedom from tyranny, freedom from terrorists and all this stuff. But how do you think that person over there in Yemen or wherever that drone's flying in, what do you think they think about that? The people that shot that thing over and is trying to kill their kids. Yeah, I know I'm getting off kind of on a tangent here, but it's just to illustrate the hypocrisy of this moral, ethical aspect and preferring right over wrong. Okay? Now, if they were tuned into this essence, or this God essence, or this higher creative part of themselves that has nothing to do with religion, nothing, has nothing to do with state, has nothing to do with any of that stuff, school, social norms, nothing. If they tuned into that higher, we are all one, mitaku ye oya sin, like the Lakota say, and I've said before, we are all one, they would not harm a hair on anybody's head. Unless that person was like an immediate threat coming up to kill their family or something. So you think about conscience, and then, that applies, I can't emphasize this enough, and I've used several examples like relationships and age and war and, sexual preference or whatever, people feel guilty about or don't feel guilty about. Throw it out the window. Relieve yourself of the pressures and realize what you've been indoctrinated with and what your true essence is. Throw all that guilt crap out the window. Throw all that fear and anxiety and all that stuff out the window. Because is it doing you any good? Live your life. Be who you are. But while you do that, don't forget the spiritual aspect of going within, going as above, so below. I was in the park today and I was doing my exercises, I do some Tai Chi, and I do the yoga, and I do some different things. I do some tracking techniques. And I noticed this guy sitting over there homeless, and I've seen them there many times. And I thought, that guy just sits over there and is quiet and he's not bothering anybody, and he's just seems like I just get a good vibe from him. So I knew he was homeless, so I reached in my back pocket, pulled out a dollar bill, folded it up, went over there, and just handed it to him. And he looked at me almost with shock. But then he went, "Oh, okay." I said, "I thought you might be able to use this." Now, I know that's not much, but considering my financial condition right now, and it's the act of giving. Like I was talking about before, it's the act of giving somebody something. Not talking about your problems and your situation all the time, but thinking about other people. And that to me, and so how did that make me feel? Because I was like, wanting to revisit that feeling of giving, because giving to me is what gives you that inner feeling of goodness. And it feels really good. I felt good, and he goes, "I can really use this." And I go, "Well, I'd rather give it to somebody that's not trying to hit me up, somebody like you." And he goes, "I would never do that." And I go, "I know you wouldn't. I felt that, so I'm giving this to you." And he goes, "Well, I appreciate it." And I walked away and I had a warm feeling, and it felt good to give because I connected with somebody, my fellow man. Now that to me is the part that rises above conscience. Okay, because I realize that I have a oneness with that person. That person is me. That person could be me. That person is me. I have been homeless before. So then I asked him, when I was standing there, I asked him, "Well, I'm just curious, did you choose your homelessness, or did the government or somebody screw you over?" And he goes, "No, I chose it." I went, "Oh, that's awesome. I can understand that." And he goes, "Yeah, I don't want to be any part of this society. I don't want to be a slave to the system. I don't want to be on the grid." And I just looked at him. I thought, this man is not only homeless, but he's intelligent. Because look at all these people running around, on their computers every day and their cell phones and all this stuff, and they're not thinking about how much on the grid, quote unquote, they are. Everything they do is watch. You think that homeless guy in the park is watched? Think they're watching him? Think they got his cell phone? He doesn't even have one. I'm kind of rambling, but I do this a lot when I have, I don't care what I'm talking about, whether it's conscience or anything else, because I channel spirit, I just allow the energy to come through me, and I talk, and I don't try not to get in my own way. And that's why I fumble sometimes, or I'll just completely lose it, not remember where I started or anything. Not that I'm doing that now. I remember exactly where I started, and that was with conscience. So I guess the bottom line here is that there's a phony conscience. Okay, there's the Christian religion, inbred belief system, within the duality, yin and yang, right and wrong. I think I'll write a song, man. I'll be a rap artist. Yin and yang and right and wrong. Anyway, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about don't get into the right and wrong and the guilt and the fear and I shouldn't do this and shouldn't do that are instilled there by belief systems, which they mistake as a conscience, which isn't a conscience. It's a programming of your mind, your unconscious, not your conscience. Get to the point where you realize the difference between that spiritual self that you would do good for somebody. Now, some of these people I can't figure, like the ones in the government that shoot drones off. And I mean, what are they thinking? Do they have a conscience? Well, let's say they're following their inbred conscience. They're not, because we know they're not, because we're all one. So what about the other thing that they call a conscience that they've been indoctrinated with in their belief system? Well, let's see then, if somebody's shooting drones, or they're cutting somebody's throat, or they're hurting somebody, or they're shooting bullets at somebody and all this stuff, well then let's see what could have caused them to do that. Their belief system. They were raised a certain way. Well, I wonder how they were raised. With no morals whatsoever. I mean, according to the morals of society and that whole brainwashed, that's another topic. So basically the enlightened person looks at the actions of other people that have been inbred with belief systems that they call a conscience, and they can immediately determine how that person's belief systems are impacting on who they are as what they put out. And I think that's what Yeshua meant in the Bible when it says more important what comes out of your mouth than what goes in. That's a metaphor. It's more important what your actions are, what you say, what you do. That's the important thing. So there's the enlightened person looks at that aspect and says, you know, I can see how that person was brought up. Is it their fault? No, not necessarily. They're a brainwashed victim. Of course, you would hope that other people would try to help them understand, like their wives or and then being this enlightened being, you look at that aspect, the belief system that they call the conscience, and then you look at the higher levels of consciousness. See, that's so close, it can be confusing. Consciousness, don't mistake consciousness with conscience. Now, I hope that whatever is instilled in mankind, that's that clear essence that is realizing our oneness with the other. And I'll use a word here in our common terminology. If you don't have to use oneness, you can use empathy. Because having empathetic feelings towards another means you are putting yourself in their place, and by putting yourself in their place, then you are becoming them and you're feeling what they're feeling. So people, we need to think about things like, are the people that are ruling us, or the people that are telling us what to do, and even ourselves, the learned dumbing down, the learned, covering up of the light, or whatever you want to call it. I'm sure some of these new age people, it's a covering up of, no, it's being in tune with the nature of things, Great Spirit. And you can call it God or whatever you want to call it. So, I don't know, that's my kind of take on it. And, if you have ideas, and I'm not saying I kind of just put thoughts out there, excuse me, like I always do. People sometimes think, oh, Thunder's trying to tell me what to do. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm thinking out loud. I'm channeling spirit. I'm a Native American elder and I'm a wisdom keeper, but I'm not perfect. I haven't seen any perfect people walking around the earth lately. There are none. That's another concept of, oh, I'm not perfect. Well, where did that come from? So anyway, I guess I'll just kind of end it there today, but if you want to check out my website, spiritofcrazyhorse.com, it's down below this video where you push about and boop, comes down a little menu thing and little link there, Spirit of Crazy Horse. You click on that, you go to my website. And it's got my, it's got an email thing over there where you can contact me. I'm kind of withdrawing from Facebook right now, and so I don't know if these videos will get out as much, but hey, they don't really help you that much anyway, and basically all they do is police you. They're not what people call a networking social network. Forget the word network. They want to charge you for everything and put all these rules and regulations. So I'm going to look around, go to some different social websites or whatever and see if I can get the word out in another way. But anyway, getting back to my Spirit of Crazy Horse website, it also has a place in there for donations. And I appreciate any donations I get, and I've gotten some. And so I have no qualms about accepting that because I pay for software and electricity to run this computer and the cable company, which keeps going up and up and up so they can spy on us. We get paid to have people spy on us. That's brilliant. Sometimes I even wonder what I'm doing on here. Anyway, I love you all, bless you all, and Mitakuye Oyasin, we are all one. Remember that, and let go of the fear, guilt, and all that stuff and get into the pure essence of yourself. Anyway, I'm out of here. Adios. Later on, people. Take care. Blessings.